Hello everyone, welcome to Raw Sound Entertainment's second episode of the top 500 greatest albums according to Rolling Stone. This is our personal review of the albums, and I am Sam.
And I'm Marshall.
And today we're looking at B.B King's Jailhouse album, more specifically from Live in Cook Jail. And before I start this episode, I should say that if you want to follow us along, make sure to listen to this album before watching the video because it'll make more sense. Also, if you have anything to share with us about this video or about the album, you can also hashtag 500greatest and leave it in the comments below, and we'll be happy to interact with you there. So let's begin with this album. Just give us a bit of background information, Marshall.
Yeah, so this album, let's start with the artist itself. B.B King. For those of you who are familiar with him, you probably know him as a legend. For those of you who aren't, he's a legend. He's one of the most influential guitar players and R&B artists in history. He started his career really early on in the right before the 50s, I think 1949, and he continued it to his death just a few months ago. So this listening to this album is actually kind of relevant because he just passed away, and he was a true legend of the industry. He was born, interestingly enough, on a cotton plantation in 1925 in Mississippi, in a little town, and or near a little town. And what's interesting about that is on the last album, if you guys were watching our thoughts on Equemini by Outkast, we talked about how a lot of their influences as African Americans living in like poorer neighborhoods were sort of fed into the album, and also living from a perspective of living in the South because they were from Savannah and Atlanta. Well, he's got an even more thick perspective because he was born in 1925 on a plantation. Now, for those of you who don't know, the cotton plantations still used cheap African-American labor well after slavery. It was just they weren't paid barely anything, and they lived on the plantation, which, interestingly enough. So you could say, is slavery really over? So he sort of lived that life of living on a plantation, working for barely anything. And somehow he got out of it, and he became one of the most influential blues artists and one of the best guitar players of all time. This album, one of his earlier ones in 1971, he performed in a jail. He was requested by the inmates there to perform, and they hooked it up, and he performed in front of a crowd of inmates as well as some other people from the jail, and so it's a really good. We'll get to if it's good or not later, but that's the album, Live at Cook County Jail.
Now, there's certainly no doubt that B.B King is influential and that this album is really unique. For one thing, it's a live album, so you really feel like you are in the prison while listening to it because you can hear the prisoners yelling and you can hear them cheer for B.B King and boo the foreman or the warden.
They booed a judge, a sheriff, and a warden.
Yeah, so
they booed three officials.
In the intro track, he comes out and he's like B.B King, or he comes in and it's like your warden, everybody boos. The judge, everybody boos, and then B.B King, and they go crazy. I thought that was really special because you can see sort of their love for the artist that came in. Mm-hmm. And it was really weird because it's like at that time, would they have really brought B.B King to a prison to do a show? And like, it's surprising. It must have been a pretty progressive prison to have that sort of thing happen because it seems like such a weird thing to have such a big celebrity, especially at the time, to come in and do a show for prisoners.
Well, I think also is a really ingenious idea by B.B King by his full name is actually Riley B. King.
Okay.
But BB, I thought it was really interesting that King did this. It was really smart on his part because a lot of his audience have been in jail. At that time, the percentage, especially This is right after the Civil Rights Movement. The percentage of African Americans who have been in jail at one point in their life at this time would skyrocketed.
Let's also look at like what it did to Elvis's career as well with the Jailhouse Blues.
Yeah, so this is an album that a surprising percentage of Americans can relate to, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of artists wouldn't try to pander to that audience. And I think B.B. King took it as a good opportunity to further his career. So a very smart man, or maybe his publicist or whoever hooked it up is
His manager,
smart.
yeah.
His manager, but he was smart to accept the opportunity at the very least.
So let's get into the album. Let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of this video. So let's talk about sort of the sounds that you hear. It's very, very, of course, it's bluesy. I mean, he loved the blues and he performed the blues, but I am not a very how could you say, adverse in blues? Could you say that? Is that something that you'd say?
Yeah.
Not very familiar with blues. So going into this, I was sort of going in blind, sort of as Marshall was going into the past album.
Might say that you're more of a Red kind of guy.
No, but no. I was going into this sort of blind, so it was sort of a surprise. I knew what blues sounded like, but I never really actively listened to blues. So this was not a surprise, but like sort of a new experience for me, you could say. And I liked some of it. I liked some of these songs, but I didn't really like all of them. So let me go into some of my favorite tracks, and then I'll let Marshall talk about his favorite tracks. So my favorite one was How Blue Can You Get, which is I think the third track on the album, if I'm correct. The third track on the album, and he's talking about making comparisons with his wife about how he gives her all these great things and she doesn't appreciate it. And it was really funny. It was really clever lyrics, and the way that there's, I think, trumpets in the song too that I really liked, and it was very orchestral, very grand. It was a very grand song and used all the instruments. You could hear the drums, you could hear the guitar, and you can pick out every instrument in this song because it's all very raw, of course. And next, there was Worry, 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 which was probably my favorite track on the album because of how unique it was. It was not, he sung a little bit in it, but most of it was him talking to the inmates and telling them good morals as how to not propagate domestic violence against, I guess, the men and the women. Both.
A lot of it was just like interesting sort of riffing about sexual tensions between men and women. It wasn't necessary. Like he talked a little bit about domestic violence, but I think it was a lot of it was just sort of like, when you go to your wife, you say, "I messed up, honey."
Yeah.
He's basically talking about I think marital relationships in general, not necessarily just abuse, but he does touch on that.
He does touch on abuse, which I thought was really interesting because back in the 70s, it was not seen that badly to propagate domestic violence in your house or to be violent towards especially wives in that time, and terrible, of course. But B.B. King was sort of telling these prisoners to not go hitting their wives and to love their wives, and I thought that was really good. I thought that was really something that was different because at the time it was sort of an untouched subject because it was very sexist. It was very sexist society at the time, so it was weird to hear that, and I thought it was very interesting. And to these days, that would never be said because it's just sort of too taboo for radio, if you want to say it that way. And I like the last song, which was "Please Accept My Love," because it was different. It was a different song, and it was a good closer to the album. And at the end, he says, "I might play at this prison again." Everybody cheers, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, and I mean, for all we know, he could have, because I mean, he probably wouldn't have recorded 2 albums there. So he could have gone there again just for kicks.
Yeah, it's very possible.
He might. I actually think he did. It feels like something he would
probably
do.
Yes.
He's a really. I mean,
he seemed like a nice guy.
This guy's a really nice guy, and
yes.
and the fact that he had such an enormous career, playing up until his death at 89 years old.
89 years old. Crazy.
That's someone who's dedicated to making music.
I can just hope to live to 80. Right? And then he made it to 89 and was still playing music. That's crazy. I think that's really amazing. So how about you? Favorite tracks?
Yeah, well, my favorite track is Introduction. No, I actually think Introduction's interesting. So, like, basically, like we mentioned earlier, it's basically just a woman is introducing to the inmates that they brought in B.B. King, basically introducing the sort of officials that run the prison and that sort of thing, and they start out the album, and I thought that was an interesting to put that in there. because it kind of gets you prepared. Because in a lot of ways, this is. I mean, obviously, this is more music than not, but this album also has a good mixture of just commentary.
Yes.
And I think that was setting the tone of the album, that this is a live album and there's going to be a lot of commentary in it, and I like that. I really like the first two songs, Every Day I Have the Blues, How Blue Can You Get, Love. I personally, honestly, like a lot of these songs, so I guess I'll have to narrow it down to my three favorite songs are How Blue Can You Get, The Thrill Is Gone, and Please Accept My Love. Now, How Blue Can You Get? Freaking loved the lyrics in that.
Yeah, so it was very clever.
I absolutely love them. The Thrill Is Gone had just this really classic beat. It worked really well, and I think it was in some ways the most interesting. It was the most interesting song on the album while still retaining its complete bluesiness, in my opinion. And Please Accept My Love was a sort of a deviation from that genre, that style. He used more different instruments in it. It was a different singing style. And by the way, this man, he's revered for his guitar skill, but I think he's got an angelic voice, very beautiful voice.
Oh yeah, his singing was very, very good.
I mean,
yes.
It's perfect for what he does, and he can do a lot of things with that voice. He can go really high, really low. He's also got a great speaking voice. I'd love to hear him just narrate an audio book or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a documentary. He's got that great sort of warm, friendly voice. But yeah, those were my three favorite tracks on the album. Although I liked most of the album.
Okay, yeah.
I also thought that the album was a really good size.
It was more of an EP size.
It was half the size of our last album, which I like shorter albums. Some of my favorite albums are around this size, but then again, my favorite album is very large, so I don't know. I'm kind of a weird guy, but for example, one of my favorite albums, which we'll be doing eventually if we ever get to it, The Stranger by Billy Joel, is around this size. So it's a lot of my favorite albums are around 8 songs.
It was really good because I liked it. It didn't feel too long. It didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome. The last album, which was a little bit longer, the middle of it felt a little bit like it was outstaying its welcome. But this album right here, so sorry?
just from the previews I've taken into a couple of the albums ahead of us,
there's some long ones.
There are some albums that are going to overstay their welcome.
Okay. Well, we won't jinx it. Okay. We won't spoil anything.
Get out of my house, Buzzcats. Anyway.
No, but in all honesty, I thought this album was the perfect length because you can only do so much in a prison, right? You can only have such a long show before you have to leave, and it's a live album. They're not going to be doing a full 2-hour set like they would in an actual paid concert. So it was the perfect length. I thought
well, also I don't think they, even on a normal 2-hour concert, I don't think they record all the songs they perform.
No.
If they do a live album of a concert, I think they only record half of them or something.
Maybe.
Because a lot of performers do songs in concerts that they're recording, that the record companies, the record labels have not let them put on albums. So they use concerts especially nowadays with how much censoring there is. They use concerts to perform songs that their record company's like, yeah, you can perform whatever you want in a concert, but you're not putting that on the album. So not all live albums have all the songs that they perform.
All right. Well, anyways, that being said, it was a perfect length. So, I personally thought the album sounded very similar. All the tracks sounded similar in that case. In other words, every song sounded like it was just a variation of the other, and maybe I'm just not very, don't have a very good ear with blues, which is very possible because I've never listened to it. And for that reason, it was hard for me to really distinguish the tracks and really say which ones were my favorites and not. But the one track that I sort of remember not really liking was 3 O'Clock Blues because it was a 2-part track. It was sort of a longer medley of 2 tracks, 2 of his older songs. And I didn't like the first half of it, which was 3 O'Clock Blues. I remember. And we saw somewhere that it was one of his biggest hits, so it's kind of ironic that I didn't like it, or whatever. But I personally did not really find that song as enjoyable as the others. And I thought it was really good background music, though. Really good for just sort of setting a mood. You don't really notice that it's there. He's very subtle, but when you listen to him, he's not subtle. That's the thing, right? Like, I was doing other work while I was listening to it. I was sort of just looking around on the internet or whatever, and it was like I could just hear the music, just hear the blues, and I wasn't hearing what he was saying exactly, unlike Outkast, where everything was so blatant and yelled. Here it was all very mellow and which is very bluesy, of course. Maybe I'm just saying things that are obvious to everyone. Maybe I'm just saying stupid things, but that's how it felt to me, so I'll leave it at that.
My least favorite songs, I didn't love the medley either. And I did not like Sweet 16. Sweet 16 was probably my least favorite song. It just didn't call to me like the other ones did. I didn't like the lyrics. I didn't love the sound. But I mean, I disagree with you for the most part on. I mean, I mean, if you're saying like, I mean, obviously, yeah, all the songs are blues songs, but like, I do think there's distinctive sounds in the different songs. I do think that there is a sort of theme that's carried along, but I think the reason that there's a theme is that this is a rather short album, and so on a short album like this, I think it's important to carry on themes like that. So I don't view it. I think maybe we're viewing the same thing differently. I think you're viewing it as you know, the songs are all similar. I'm viewing it more as the songs follow a theme, and I think they deviate well from that theme in a reasonable amount. But I think they follow a theme. But yeah, that's my opinion on the album. I really only didn't like one of the songs a lot, but most of the songs I like quite a bit. And this is the kind of album that I could definitely see listening to quite a bit. Definitely am going to be looking out for it next time I'm at my music store. But
you see, I personally could never see myself listening to this again. Not that I didn't like it, it's just that it's not something that I would listen to actively. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, scores, we'll start with you since I went first last time. What's your score?
Well, my score is going to be a 7 out of 10. Like I said, the album was solid. It wasn't perfect. It could have done a little better thing here and there, but and also I'm not a huge fan of the blues. Like, I like the blues. I can appreciate the blues, but I don't listen to it that often, so it's not going to get a 9 out of 10. But maybe if I like the blues more, it would get a higher score.
And I'm going to lowball you a little bit with a 6 out of 10 because I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun period piece, but would I listen to it again? Probably not, because it just did not call to me to the same way that the previous album really I enjoyed. But this one, I enjoyed some of the tracks, but most of them I found myself, I hate to say it, but bored. So that's it. So that's our scores. Either agree with them or disagree with them in the comments. Let us know. If you want to join us on this journey, once again, hashtag 500greatest, it's on the screen. Also, if you want to talk to us directly, we have Twitter pages in the description as well. And that's it. So we'll be trying to make these videos once every 2 days. So do tune in on the next day, which will be Thursday, the September 10th, 2015, where we will have our next video up. Right?
That sounds right to me.
All right, great. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you later. Okay, so we forgot to tell you what is the next album that we're going to be reviewing. Number 498. It is going to be the Stone Roses self-titled album. And what is that going to be like, Marshall?
Well, this album released in 1989. It was basically it's going to have a lot of 90s sounds. So it was released in the late 80s, and any album, any good album that is released at the end of a decade is going to have a lot of the sound carrying with it of the next decade, because it, you know, hopefully it's influential. And this song is definitely very influential for 90s British pop as well as pop in general for the 90s. It has some grunge in it, has some other 90s themes. I think we'll see a lot of that.
So we're gonna get a lot of like Coldplay sounds and sort of stuff like that.
I would say they're not gonna be quite that developed, because like this is an early version.
So it's gonna be a very sort of avant-garde album for the time.
Yeah, and they at this time this album really the Stone Roses' only hit. people thought they were going to be leading another British invasion with this album.
And then said they fell apart.
Yeah, it never happened.
All right, well, we'll be happy to bring you guys that review in 2 days. So see you then, and this time officially, see you next time.